This is Newstalk Lunchtime. Still lots of messages coming in on the household charge. We'll get back to them a little later in the programme. But I want to turn our attention to our health service now, because we've spoken a lot about it recently and its problems with the health service. There are many good things that go on every single day that are through the hard work and the diligence primarily of the staff in the health service. But so many problems have emerged in recent times. We spoke to Susan on this programme. Her child's hearing was permanently damaged because of delays in getting treatment through the public system. There are parents who spent last night sleeping on mattresses beside their children's cot following heart surgery in Crumlin Children's Hospital and others. And there are waiting lists that are growing longer by the day for potentially life-saving tests. I mean, so what is the situation on the ground in our hospitals today? Where are the problems? And why is it the case that so many doctors are now afraid to speak up on behalf of their patients for fear of what the HSE would say to them? We're joined by two doctors who have spoken out. Professor Michael O'Keefe, who's a consultant ophthalmologist at Temple Street Children's Hospital. He's with us in studio here. You're welcome, Michael.
Thanks.
And Professor John Crown, who is in our studio in Leinster House. John Crown, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Jonathan. Good afternoon, Michael.
Good afternoon, John.
Michael, can I turn to you first of all, because you highlighted the issue of Temple Street's theatres, that the theatre time there was being cut by somewhere in the region of a third. Did you ever think you would, in your professional career, have to end up talking to the media to highlight this issue? I mean, did you not think that the purpose of this whole system was that you would go to a manager somewhere in the HSE and say, well, look, this is what we need to do to help patients?
Oh, I never thought I'd do so, and it is not I don't like doing it. It's not what I normally should be doing. But the problem is that that's a waste of time. And the hospital itself and the hospitals, I think, in general, are afraid to speak up and issue the problems as they are. And I think that would be the first thing, to admit there's a significant problem. But we seem to think that the CEOs of these hospitals and the board of management of the hospitals seem to be in fear of giving the true picture out to speaking up on behalf of the hospital.
Why is that fear there, though? Because, I mean, that's not what drives doctors. What drives doctors is making patients better.
Well, in doctor's case, I think the fear is there's been a new contract and there's been a gagging clause. I never took the new contract because I never believed in it, because I think we've got to, like John Crown and myself, we've got to have the freedom to speak up. We are independent people. We're advocates for our patients. That's what keeps me in a living. That's my constituency. And I've never believed that I'm always an independent person. But that's the problem. Doctors signed up a gagging clause. They thought they were getting more money, and the contract fell apart. Of course, they didn't get any more money, and they got gagged. And then there's the other thing. Young consultants are afraid to speak up because they're new. They get intimidated. They get a letter threatening them that if they do this, that something will happen to them. And also, I suppose people are fearful. It's a chore for doctors. They're great at their work, but they're not people who come up front.
You mentioned the letter. Did you ever get a letter from the HSE?
I know I got a letter. No, not this time. But the first time I came on and I spoke about this about 2 years ago, I got a letter from the board of management of the hospital in Temple Street telling me that I shouldn't do this and that I was bringing the hospital into disrepute.
John Crown, why would they do that? I mean, first of all, why would you think they would impose a gagging clause on new consultants? And second of all, that's not what hospital management should be doing. Surely they should be standing by people who are trying to do the best interest. They have the best interest of the hospital at heart.
Well, the whole management system, Jonathan, is just so intensely and fundamentally dysfunctional that there's an internal logic to it. The principal metric against which the hospital will be measured is coming in on budget at the end of the year and not embarrassing the government and Minister of the Day. So they're heavily incentivized to try and maintain the fiction that there is no deficiency in the service. And this works its way all the way through, typically from senior civil service right down to hospital management. And certainly when I came back to Ireland in 1993, it became obvious to me very, very, very quickly that there was something catastrophically wrong with the standards of cancer care in the country, mainly because there were nearly no cancer specialists. The numbers were tiny. And after going through, rather naively, through the official channels for a number of months during my first year back in St. Vincent's, I finally went public and I started making the point repeatedly that, many places were treating cancer in the country that were not safe to treat cancer, and that the number of cancer specialists was absurdly low. The official reaction was extraordinary. I was brought in front of a group in my own hospital in St. Vincent's at the time and told that communications had been received from the Department of Health that they needed to shut me up, and that if they didn't...
Shut you up? That exact phrase?
Yes. Yeah, well, I can't remember.
Paraphrasing, but later. Yeah, along those lines.
That they needed to restrain me from making public comments about deficiencies in the cancer services. There was an or in this, and the or is that they might look critically at where they were going to give resources for the proposed development of St. Vincent's. And I was told in no uncertain terms that my actions were somehow undermining the chance that the hospital would get new building projects, which it desperately and urgently needed. As well as that, on a subsequent occasion, when we finally got a bit of critical mass going with some of the cancer specialists, we were called in for a meeting with senior members of the Department of Health. And again, we were told that they were very anxious that there would be no public discussion about these problems while they were dealing with them. And I said, well, I'm not signing up to, as they say in the mafia, an omerta clause. I said, you fix the problems, and until you do, we'll talk about the problems. And in truth, it was Michael Noonan, when he first came in as Minister for Health, I believe in the beginning of 1995, who made a speech nearly parroting what I had said, in which he said there were hospitals in the country he wouldn't let a relative go to for cancer care. So I was very depressed when I heard Michael's comments last week, but there was a little part of me punched the air and went, hurrah. It's good to hear a doctor speaking out, and I think what Michael did was correct. I think it was heroic, and I do think all of those pressures which he is alluding to, which conspire to keep us quiet, together in truth with a lot of pressure from within our own profession, which is deeply conservative and often doesn't like boat rockers, because one group who have not done too badly in general out of the health service are medicine. And while most doctors, I believe, do really strive hard for reforms which will improve care for patients, there's a certain tendency towards conservatism and a certain tendency to keep the head down, which I think comes from many factors.
Yeah, it comes from many factors, but Michael touched on this, that there are young doctors now who are on these new contracts who are scared of the HSE as their employer. So they're afraid that if they tell the truth of the hours that they have worked or where the system is falling down, if they speak out, they'll find themselves in the same position that you did back in St. Vincent's.
Yeah, well, the problem, Jonathan, is, I think, very fundamental. And the problem is that the people who actually wield all the power in the health service, who are the hospital administrators, the civil service, all of these folks, the HSE officials, they are the ones who have all management authority in the health system right now. They regard the nurses, the doctors, and the physios to be another part of the technical pie which works within the hospital network, the same as the guys who fix the boilers and the people who make sure there are enough car parking spaces. They don't actually buy into the notion that there should be clinical leadership with technical managers working under them to ensure that the technical management skills are looked after, things like payroll, human resources, physical plant, all of these things. They don't want that model. And that is a model which I think exists in the best run hospitals in the world, where there is someone, typically a doctor or senior clinician, who is a full-time employee of the hospital, who does not have an independent separate practice, who just works for the hospital and provides the vision and the goals for the hospital, who is supported in her or his work by the skills of a number of technical professional managers, but they are not providing the vision. And the problem is here, they just want us to be technicians.
Michael, was the problem, Michael O'Keefe is with us in studio, was the problem the creation of the HSE? When this was set out as being the panacea for our health service, that they were going to have one body overseeing the entire health service, get rid of the health boards, but in the end it became too unwieldy a body, and it has done more damage than the old health board system ever could.
Oh, I think it was a monster. It was a creation of a monster that now is, I think, in fairness to James Riley, has been trying to dismantle it, but he's got his work cut out. And you see, I always look at this. This is a country of 4 million people. We're no bigger than the size of Greater Manchester. And yet we have a HSE, a Department of Health. We have numerous quangos running our health system. It is inconceivable that we have this number of people to administer a health system in a country of 4 million people. And that is the problem. And then so the result of that is you have managers at all levels in the HSE and the Department of Health, and you have duplication, and you have lack of decision making, and it's just a monster. I don't know how one can even dismantle it.
We spoke before about the conditions in Temple Street where you work, but we also spoke afterwards with Orla Franklin from Crumlin Children's Hospital, and she was giving us an insight into patients there and children that are in cots, and if there's a cardiac problem they have to move bins out of the way, and there's paint peeling off the walls and sinks hanging off the walls, and they're trying to fundraise. For parents and for patients in the hospital, staff work very hard. Staff are brilliant. The one thing we always get are messages that staff are brilliant, but from the infrastructure point of view, I mean, is that another area that patients are being badly let down?
Well, the infrastructure in Temple Street is a hospital that's in decline, has been for years. I mean, Crumlin have been talking about how bad their structure is. Temple Street is many times worse. And we've now got a system where 5 years ago we were ready to build a new Temple Street hospital. We had planning permission. We had out to tender. In fact, they'd spent 33 million before. The 68 million now gone on the Mater site. We were ready to build, and we came on with a national centre. We went along with that. So we know that's now up in smoke. There's nothing happening. I don't believe where that'll resurrect itself again in the future.
And how long can Temple Street keep going?
Well, Temple Street has been patched up every now and then. It's sort of a patching job. There's a bit here, done there, done everywhere. I don't know, maybe 5-10 years more. Maybe forever. But it's pretty in a decaying state and Dickensian, really.
And when you're talking about patients and you're talking about sick children that are going to be in that hospital, again, everything is going to be done for them by the staff. But, I mean, what conditions, what kind of treatments, what kind of outcomes can we expect from a hospital that's passed its sell-by date?
Well, I think outcomes are good. I mean, that's the good thing about this country. I think we do provide a pretty excellent standard of care, I know, irrespective of what people say. And I see surveys abroad about where Ireland falls. In my practice, I don't find that. The standard of care, healthcare in this country is very, very good. It's, in my view, is as good as anything. And I'm like John Crown. We travel the world. We go to meetings, and I think we're as good as anybody in the world. Okay, we don't have the infrastructure, but there are real problems in basically what has happened in the last 5 or 6 years. We took loads of beds out of our system. We took thousands of beds out of our health system, and that's one of the problems we face now. We have a capacity issue, and it's been in casualty, and all the solutions to the A&E issues are only sort of rubber stamping or stopgap measures. We have an issue where people, your mother, my mother, sisters, brothers, aunts, people listening to this programme will know, they come in and they're lying in trolleys and chairs in A&Es for days.
So, but how do we get past that? Because, I mean, there are numerous attempts. I've lost count of how many reports from my own area in the south of the country where they're saying, oh, well, this is going to solve it. And every time we take a step forward, we seem to be 2 steps back. So, I mean, John Crown referenced that it's not clinician-led. You're a clinician. How would you start to fix this?
Well, I would start to fix, I mean, first of all, I think we have to open beds. We have to get more beds back into
No money for that.
Well, we've not 16 billion anymore, but we've 14 billion. But there are an awful things in hospital practice that I think could be improved. I mean, public hospitals, in my view, are inefficient, ineffective. I work in both systems. The private system would beat it hands down. I mean, you know, we've got basic things don't happen. We don't start in time. The clinics don't run in time. People get cancelled at short notice. You try and ring a hospital.
But how do we fix
the phone isn't answered.
But how do we fix that?
Oh, we've got to have an attitude problem. We've got to get, like John said, we've got to get 1 or 2 or 3 managers in. We've got to get rid of all the committees and the subcommittees and the paper flying here and there, and the committees are meeting about committees. And we've got to put 1 or 2 or 3 people in a manager who'll come out of his office and see what's happening on the ground. We don't get that.
John, how would you try and tackle that? Because, I mean, that is all very laudable, but if you went in there and tried to do that, I'd imagine the unions wouldn't be too happy with you for a start.
I don't think the unions would have too much to fear. I mean, I think if I had dictatorial powers over the health system, I would announce a very rapid phased introduction of a move to a universally insurance-based system where the activity, every bit of hospital activity in the country would be based on the premise that the money follows the patient, that hospitals which treat more patients get more money, hospitals who leave patients languishing on waiting lists get less money. And there's a reality about this, Jonathan, that the person who is on the waiting list is free. The person on the waiting list is good for the hospital. There is a logic from the hospital's point of view to having people on the waiting list because they get a fixed lump of money in January and they are told to make it last until New Year's Eve. That's what they have to do. Yeah. So if more patients come, the money won't go as far and they start doing things like closing wards for painting or for maintenance or forced vacations or whatever.
But I find that fascinating, John, because if you look at a household budget, nobody budgets for 12 months. Everybody budgets for a month. So why do hospitals not do that? Why don't they give them money for 3 months and see how they get on with that?
Well, it's because you see, I think the household budget model is wrong. I don't think a budgetary model works here. It's a bit like saying to McDonald's, this is how many potatoes you will have to make chips for the rest of the year. And if you get more customers in, by the way, you're going to either have to make them wait longer for chips or give them fewer chips. That's all you can do because these are all the spuds you're going to get. It's determined in January. What we need to do is to make these more of social enterprises. And I repeat, not advocating a privatization of the health system, but I am advocating advocating is a move towards the kind of model which is, and I'm not making this up, Jonathan, the 5 best European health systems, according to access to care, i.e. waiting lists, all work on the model of social insurance. And the big example, I think, is Germany. They do it very well.
Well, I want to talk to you about James Riley's plans, because James Riley we're looking in particular at one plan. I want to get both of your opinions on that. And a lot of messages are coming in on the issue of consultants' pay, because a lot of our listeners think that is a fundamental issue when we're talking about the reform of the health service. Professor John Crown and Professor Michael O'Keefe staying with us. This is Newstalk Lunchtime. Professors John Crown and Michael O'Keefe are still with us. Lots of people talking about consultants' pay as being part of the problem here. James Riley, the Health Minister, was in with the lads on Newstalk Breakfast recently. This is what he had to say on the issue.
The Cabinet have not got infinite patience either. We want to get from consultants what will deliver what we want. And what I want is more patients treated more quickly. Now, it might give us a lovely, good, warm feeling to give them a good kick in the shin and take 50 million off them and we'll all feel great. Will that give us that? I don't think it will. But what will give us that is if they come in on Saturdays and Sundays, which they're starting to do through the SDU.
James Riley there implying, Michael O'Keefe, that for the Irish part, consultants aren't doing their part.
Well, I mean, there are some consultants not, I think, but the problem is that the hospitals don't provide the facilities. Let's call the bluff of consultants. Take example, Temple Street. We increased.
Would you work on a Saturday and Sunday?
Oh yeah, of course I would. But the problem is that Temple Street increases actually by 12% last year. Along came the HSE and said, "Come on, guys, you're doing too much work. You've got to cut back. We're going to cut your budget." And therefore, the result was they closed down an operating room. The problem here is that James Riley will have to provide the infrastructure and the facilities and then call the bluff of consultants. The really problem at the moment is that he must know all this. He's a doctor himself. Operating lists are being cancelled, they're being cut back because the patients can't get into hospital.
But you have a public and a private practice as well. So do you just, if those public patients aren't being treated, do you just end up treating more private patients?
No, well, I mean, you end up private practice as such. Many of them can't go private because they don't have health insurance. But the problem here is that this is all fine stuff because doctors are easy to kick around. They're well paid. They're regarded as the usual word fat cat doctors and so on. But that doesn't solve the problem. He's got to come down and provide the facilities. He's got to get into the hospital. Like I said earlier, he's got to streamline the management, get the clinics working properly, get the phones answered, get the operating list going and get them full operating lists and maybe stop all the private patients in the public, put public patients on public operating lists, and that will help. But to say this and without doing that is meaningless.
John Crown?
Well, I mean, again, it goes to the core of the problem. As Lincoln once said, a house divided against itself cannot stand. And we need to end the public-private split. We need to have a single-tier insurance-based system where everybody would get the same quality of care. Now,
the problem is we're not going to get that quickly. Look, we all want to rush to some system where we have a utopian system.
Jonathan,
there's an interim and patients need to be treated, John.
Jonathan, you like others may be falling into the trap of thinking that what we're proposing is more expensive and it's something we can't afford. It would actually be a far more efficient use of the resources which we have. At the moment, we're wasting huge amounts of money. Now, on the issue of whether consultants working harder would make a difference, I can categorically tell you it would not, because the beds aren't there, the operating theatres aren't there, the slots and outpatients aren't there. When we try to book more patients in, management try to stop us. That's the way it works. Vincent's Hospital, a big 600-bed General University hospital, has got one CT scanner for elective non-emergency use. Now, you can cut that any way you want, but a hospital of its size in the US would have about 10, and in Europe would have 4 to 5. So when you do that, it means that patients are waiting for routine outpatient scans for 3 months if they're public. That's
nothing to do with how much you're being paid, is it?
No, absolutely not. And the reality is I'm paid approximately the same as a UK colleague would be paid, and they have unlimited rights to private practice, which everybody forgets. I'm not here to defend doctors' incomes. Doctors make an awful lot of money in this country, not mainly from their public salaries, but from private practice, for one reason and one reason only. The policy of successive governments has been to keep the numbers of specialist doctors down. And when you do that, you distort the market. It's that simple. About 45% of our population is private insurance, and we have, by government policy, not because there's any kind of a closed shop by doctors, the lowest number of specialists, the lowest number of GPs per head of population of any Western country by a distance.
One listener, Michael, I'll come back to you in a moment. Yeah. One listener got in contact, John, and it just goes back to an earlier point that, when you did first stick your head above the parapet and it was nearly taken off, and then improvements started to happen in cancer care in particular. But this listener raises the point, asking, is it normal for a woman in extreme pain with a lump in her breast after 3 visits to hospital just to be given very strong painkillers and have to wait until the end of April for a scan. She's still in pain. She has 3 children. Are we going backwards?
Oh, I think we are going backwards. I mean, I think there's no doubt waiting lists are lengthening. I mean, you can't have a system which is as critically understaffed and as critically under-resourced as ours is, throw in an unprecedented recession, throw in the mechanism we have for funding the hospital system. It can only react in one way, and that's to curtail services. And the simplest, easiest way for the public side to curtail service is to lengthen waiting lists. That's what's happening.
Michael, to finish with you, because you wanted to make a point, but I have to ask as well, when we spoke to you last, you were concerned about patient outcomes, and you said that children could conceivably get tumours that would kill them. Has anything, even in that short period since you said that, has anything happened?
Well, I haven't come to my rolling closures for me don't happen for 2 or 3 weeks' time, where my list will be cancelled, but already I've taken steps that anybody like that, I'm now making sure that they will come in as an emergency. They won't come into my routine list, but they'll come in as an emergency. But coming back to some of the issues, I mean, let's call Dr. Riley's bluff. Let him go to the hospitals and say to the consultants, OK, I want you to do an extra clinic every week. I'm sure he'll get the positive response. Let him say, come to me and say, will I do an extra operating list? I'll do another 10 cataracts a week. I'll take him off his STU list, his special waiting list. Let him do that and let him see what the response is. And if the response is negative, then he can go and say all of this. But the other thing is, I mean, as John says is right, but we've got to live in reality. I mean, there are 3 things driving healthcare: elderly population, technology, and increased demand. And we have all of those, and and I'm sure we all live in it, but we've less money to spend. But hospitals need to be made more. The scanners don't work in time; they don't work efficiently well enough. I mean, if you had a $1 million scanner in your house, you'd be using it far more often. We don't use them. And I'll give you an example briefly. If I have a patient for a scan, they come in and they wait in an emergency. They wait even a week as an inpatient. Then sometimes what happens, even though we have a scanner in the hospitals, we buy scans elsewhere. The hospital goes out and pays money to buy scans.
Even though there's a scanner
in the hospital. That's one example. Clinics have to run. They're not running at the efficient level. Nothing at the moment in the public is efficient. And I believe no matter what system you buy, the Dutch, the German, you mean it, that won't work unless all of this is working better. We have to. And that's the problem at the moment.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Professor Michael O'Keefe, consultant ophthalmologist at Temple Street Children's Hospital, and Professor John Crown, a consultant oncologist and a cancer researcher, and of course a senator as well. Gentlemen, thank you both very much for coming in to talk to us on Newstalk Lunchtime. 53106 is the number for your messages. Lots of people getting in contact about the state of the HSE and what the 2 doctors have been saying, even with not quite reassured by what they were saying about consultants' fees. But we'll come back to that a little bit later on. 1 o'clock is the time. Tara Duggan has the news headlines.
Well, Jonathan,